Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are taking on a piece of text that a lot of people think they know, but we're going to be looking at it through a truly radical and I think profound metaphysical lens.
It's definitely profound.
We're not just reading a biblical chapter here. We are engaging with a unique interpretation of what's often called Jesus's final, clearest conversation before his capture.
It's more than just an interpretation, it's really a dedicated search for the metaphysical mechanics behind the words. We are specifically diving into excerpts from Dr. Roy E. Richmond's work, The Divine Dance and Rhythm,
Yeah.
a metaphysical book of John.
Right.
And our focus is specifically on the RERichmond Tree of Life Bible translation and explanation of John chapter 17.
And our mission today is, well, it's pretty ambitious to really understand the core concepts of oneness, breath, and eternal identity as they're presented in this very specialized translation.
And you have to understand, this isn't just about a different choice of words. It's a commitment to removing, or trying to remove, centuries of theological allegory and metaphor to get to the pure process of spiritual realization.
The pure process. I like that.
And that commitment is everything here. Dr. Roy established a crucial frame for this conversation. He calls it the high priestly conversation, and it took place immediately before the Roman soldiers took him.
So this is the final moment, the last chance.
The last chance, exactly. The source is adamant that this was his definitive statement, his last opportunity to clearly convey his absolute spiritual understanding to the disciples before his resurrection. And this is the key. He spoke clearly, with no parables, metaphors, or allegories.
Wow. That removal of allegory just fundamentally changes the stakes, doesn't it?
Completely.
We're reading what's being argued as direct, unvarnished insight into his highest understanding of identity and union. And the central figure in this isn't just Jesus, the historical person.
Yeah.
It's Jesus speaking as the voice of breath to the disciples. And he's directing his conversation primarily to the Elohim Ruwach Breath within.
And we have to stop on that phrase, Elohim Ruwach Breath.
Yeah.
It's absolutely foundational to everything that follows.
Right.
It's not simply a substitute for, say, God the Father in a personalized sense.
It's not a one-to-one swap.
Not at all. In this context, it represents the foundational source of being, the animating principle, the pure spirit, the breath of life itself, which undergirds all manifested reality. It's really the core concept of non-separated existence. If you don't grasp this terminology, the entire conversation just reads as, disjointed theology.
Instead of what it's presented as.
Right, which is a systematic explanation of universal identity.
So, understanding the precise vocabulary that Richmond is using is our necessary first step. We really need to arm you, the listener, with these concepts before we jump into the rapid-fire declarations of John 17. Okay, let's unpack this language right away. We need to arm our listener with the essential metaphysical vocabulary that the source material provides. If you lose track of these definitions, the whole narrative of oneness just becomes confusing.
Let's clearly define the core terms Richmond employs. First, as we introduced, Elohim Ruwach Breath.
Right.
This is the foundational source of being. The term itself combines the plural majestic, Elohim, with the concept of spirit or breath, which is Ruach.
So it signifies something both singular and plural at the same time.
Precisely. It signifies the omnipresent, animating, singular yet plural source of all life. It's not a personage, but more like the unified field of existence.
Okay, that's a big concept. So moving from the source to the active principle within the messenger, we have Logos life.
Yes. Logos life. This is specifically the life principle dwelling within Jesus, which, in this context, is preparing to radiate openly.
And for anyone familiar with this, the term logos immediately triggers connections to Greek philosophy, right?
It does. It has deep roots in Hellenistic philosophy, particularly Stoicism and the concept of an immanent divine reason, or the divine ordering principle of the universe. Richmond uses it to highlight that the life principle within Jesus is the active manifesting aspect of the divine mind, ready to express its perfect order.
So logos life is like the blueprint of divine reason made manifest. How does that differ from the broader category of divine mind source?
That's a great question. The divine mind source is the origin of all being. It's the ultimate non-manifest reality, the undifferentiated consciousness from which everything flows.
The potential.
The absolute potential, yes. The Logos life is the expression or the mechanism by which the divine mind becomes visible or intelligible within a specific form, in this case, Jesus. It's the difference between that absolute potential and the perfected expression of that potential.
Okay, that makes sense. And finally, the term we have to internalize for all of us, for humanity, sacred self.
The sacred self. This is the individual, true identity of humanity that connects back directly to the source. It is the intrinsic, eternal identity, free from the constraints of ego or temporal experience.
Why that specific term, do you think, instead of soul or spirit?
Well, Richmond's deliberate choice of sacred self seems designed to sidestep the traditional theological baggage of those other terms. Soul can often imply a temporary dwelling place, and spirit can be a bit vague.
Right.
But sacred self asserts the inherent divinity and individuality of the eternal consciousness. It's the absolute antithesis of the world awareness that we're going to confront very shortly.
Excellent. Okay, with that technical framework, let's jump into verse 1, which the translation frames as the moment of radiance.
The powerful phrase.
It is. It says, Jesus lifts his conscious awareness, not physically but consciously, into the revelation of his union with the divine mind. What is the mechanical difference between radiance and a more traditional term like glory?
That's a crucial question. You're spot on. Traditional translations use glorify, which often implies external praise or recognition.
Like getting an award.
Sort of, yes.
Hmm.
Richmond uses radiance to emphasize an inherent energetic manifestation. Jesus says, Father, breath of life, the moment has arrived for Logos life within me to radiate openly, so that through this radiance I reveal the eternal splendor as the source of all.
So the radiance isn't something he's given, it's something that's emitted.
Exactly. The radiance is the visible emission of the Logos life, the pure, organized expression of Source, making the eternal, invisible splendor visible. And it happens through a conscious, energetic shift into union. It's an act of what you might call pure spiritual physics, not just a verbal request.
He is literally demonstrating the process of union itself, showing the energy shift that makes the eternal visible. Which brings us to verse 2, where we immediately connect this radiance to authority and universal life.
Yeah.
Authority is revealed through him, but what's the weight of this authority in the RERichmond context? Is it power or is it demonstration?
It is fundamentally demonstration that leads to awakening. The critique rightly notes that we need to unpack the mechanics of this awakening. The authority isn't about dominion over others.
Not command and control.
No, it's about the capacity to reveal inherent truth. The Source says this authority awakens every sacred self to the life that always existed. Now that is its significant ontological statement. The life always existed. The messenger's authority merely activates the realization of that pre-existing fact.
So the authority is just the capacity to reveal to you what you already are.
Exactly. And the critical detail here is the universality of it. This life is given to all whom Source shaped in the image of Elohim Ruwach Breath. And this invites them to know themselves as one with all beings, formed of Elohim Ruwach Breath. The authority is simply the mechanism of shared universal identity.
So it establishes that the moment of creation was the shaping of the sacred self in the image of the Source.
Meaning the capacity for oneness is universally inherent, just waiting for activation.
That dramatically reframes the concept of authority. It's the authority of a realized identity, enabling others to realize their own. This leads perfectly into verse 3, which defines the life of the ages. If life always existed, what is the life of the ages?
It's the conscious, qualitative experience of that existence. We're moving beyond chronology. The life of the ages is defined here as awakening to intimate union with the true source of being and to the awareness made visible through the consecrated messenger.
And the purpose?
The ultimate purpose is revealing the shared oneness with Elohim Ruwach Breath. This idea emphasizes that life is a state of conscious realization, a quality of connection, rather than just chronological duration.
Yeah.
You don't get eternal life. You awaken to the fact that your identity is already rooted in the eternal source.
It's an inward realization of a continuous present reality.
It is.
So, if the life of the ages is the realization of union, what was the specific job that Jesus completed? Verse 4 addresses the completion of the work. This section often gets glossed over as just simple mission fulfillment, but Richmond treats it as an absolute, completed ontological task.
He says, I have illuminated your eternal nature in the earth realm by completing the work Source gave me, which was to unveil the truth of what Elohim Ruwach Breath is and who we are and have been in Elohim Ruwach Breath from the beginning.
Okay, so the work was fundamentally what? Epistemological and ontological.
That's a perfect way to put it. Ontologically, it unveiled the fundamental nature of the Source. Epistemologically, it unveiled the truth of humanity's inherent identity and origin, who we are and have been from the beginning.
That distinction is profound. He wasn't just preaching a moral code, he was delivering a metaphysical fact sheet about the nature of reality and our place within it.
And he provided the necessary demonstration that this truth is livable within the realm of time and visibility.
And having completed that work of unveiling the truth, in verse 5, he asks for the manifestation of the result. He asks for the divine presence to reveal through his visibility the radiance that has always existed within him from the eternal before visibility came forth.
That's the key phrase.
I want to pause on that phrase. Before visibility came forth. It anchors the Logos life firmly in pre-existence. He's not asking for a future reward, is he? He's asking for the restoration of a pre-existent, eternal state to be made visible now.
That's the critical takeaway. He's not asking for something new to be created or for a temporary boost of power. He's asking for the visibility of what already is, the radiance that existed from the eternal before anything manifested into physical form.
And this is the profound connection we have to carry through this whole deep dive.
Yes. The Source explicitly notes that this same radiance belongs to every sacred self in union with the divine mind. It's not an exclusive characteristic. It's the natural state of consciousness when it's aligned with Source.
So the foundation is set. The conversation is a clear statement of shared eternal radiance stemming from Elohim Ruwach Breath, and it's intended to awaken the sacred self to universal oneness. The first 5 verses just completely redefine identity, authority, and the nature of life itself.
And now we shift focus. We move from the origin and nature of the identity to the recognition and reception of that identity by those whose consciousness was ready to receive it.
Right, verse 6 focuses on the recipients, those whose conscious awareness was prepared to receive it. They arose out of divine essence and received the unveiling. This suggests a crucial element of readiness, doesn't it? Not everyone hears this message in the same way, which implies a prerequisite state of inner listening.
That's vital. He states he unveiled divine presence to those whose consciousness was prepared. These individuals were already breaths arising out of divine essence. So what they received through him was simply the unveiling of what had always belonged to them.
So it wasn't a conversion, it was an activation.
Exactly. Think of it like a piece of code that was always there, but it required the right key, the messenger's revelation, to execute and become visible reality.
And in verse 7, we see the realization point beginning to dawn on the disciples. It says they are beginning to realize that everything expressed by Jesus comes from divine presence. How does that specific realization validate their own identity?
The validation mechanism is the flow of consciousness. The Source states, the breath of divine wisdom flows as one expression in them and in him, revealing the eternal oneness they share.
So that's the intellectual and spiritual breakthrough.
It is. They realize the source of the expression, the Logos life, is not localized to him, but is the universal flow they also share. It's an inner recognition that the underlying spiritual energy, the breath of divine wisdom, is identical in both the messenger and the recipients.
So if his source is the eternal and they share that same stream, then their source must also be the eternal.
Precisely. So the inner words and revelations he imparted in verse 8 weren't just teachings. They were energetic transmissions that were received into their conscious awareness. They recognized that Jesus originated out of the eternal, and that divine presence expressed this unveiling through him.
It's a mutual, immediate validation of a shared eternal origin.
Exactly. And this shared recognition creates a boundary, which leads us to a crucial distinction in verses 9 and 10, where Jesus establishes who he is prioritizing and why.
This is the vital separation from world awareness. He says, I speak concerning them, for their consciousness is awakening into their true identity. I am not speaking of the world awareness that lives in separation. That is a sharp line drawn in the metaphysical sand.
This is key. The world awareness is not a geographic location. It is the state of mind, the collective consciousness that operates under the illusion of being separate from the source. It is the belief structure built on competition, scarcity, and temporality.
So Jesus is focusing his attention on those who have consciously chosen to shift out of that separated state.
Yes, those who are recognizing their sacred self.
So if we think of the world awareness as the operating system running on default settings, focused entirely on separation, then the sacred self is the user logging into the hidden administrative functions, which operate outside of those constraints.
That's an excellent analogy. The world awareness is convinced the default settings are the only reality. And verse 10 reinforces the shared origin against that backdrop of separation. All of Jesus' awareness and all of their awareness arises from the same eternal source.
And the proof is visible, or at least consciously perceptible.
Right. In them, the radiance of who I am is being revealed as their own divine nature comes into visibility.
The visible proof of their origin is the manifestation of the same radiance. They are literally mirroring the divine nature. The separation is purely cognitive and experiential, not ontological.
Yes, and that brings us to verses 11 and 13, where Jesus acknowledges the practical challenge. He is leaving the world awareness of separation realm, but the disciples remain physically present within it. How does he anchor them?
He reveals to them the wholeness of holy presence, with the specific intent that they may live as one consciousness, even as I embody our oneness. It's basically an instruction manual for maintaining a non-separated identity while you're physically immersed in separation.
It is a critical instruction. The conversation itself serves as the anchor. They are meant to maintain the state of oneness, one consciousness, which is the only way to resist the pull of the world awareness structures. If they remain unified in purpose and realization, the illusion cannot penetrate their internal state.
And verse 12 details the exception, the heartbreaking choice of path that demonstrates individual agency, even in the most tightly bound group.
He states that those given to him through awakened hearing were kept in their true identity, and none of awakened awareness was lost except the one whose conscious awareness chose its own path, fulfilling what had been spoken.
So this is not framed as an external judgment or prediction.
Not at all. It is framed as a conscious internal divergence. The loss of that awareness wasn't a failure of the external teaching, but an internal choice. The conscious awareness selecting a trajectory that was divergent from the revealed true identity, opting for the world awareness perspective instead.
That puts such a heavy emphasis on free will and internal alignment. It means even if you have the Logos life unveiled right in front of you, the choice to align with it is absolutely yours.
It demands total internal honesty. And finally, verse 13 brings us to the purpose of speaking so openly and clearly. Why use this high-stakes moment for this, technical, metaphysical lecture instead of final comfort or traditional prayer?
The stated goal of speaking these things openly in this realm is deeply personal and immediate, so that my inner joy may be awakened within them, the joy of realizing their union with divine presence.
Yes.
The entire conversation is designed to transmit not just information, but the feeling, the inherent unconditional joy that accompanies the realization of eternal union.
We can connect this to the idea of resonance. When we experience profound spiritual or intellectual clarity, that aha moment, it's often accompanied by a rush of internal well-being, a sense of rightness.
Of course.
Jesus is explicitly engineering that affective state. He is giving them the necessary framework so that the reality of their union resonates within them as joy, ensuring their emotional state is aligned with their ontological truth.
It's the emotional validation of a metaphysical truth. They are meant to feel the joy of their awakened identity, making that realization sticky and self-sustaining.
Exactly.
Having established identity, union, and the immediate effect of that realization joy, Jesus now addresses the inevitable consequence of maintaining that state, conflict with the separated world.
Verse 14 sets up the dynamic of resistance. Jesus has imparted the revelation of Elohim Ruwach Breath, and the resistance comes directly from the world awareness which resists the Logos. This resistance isn't political, it's structural.
Why is the Logos, this divine ordering principle, so violently opposed by the world awareness?
The source clarifies. It resists because the creative spiritual activity and movement in humanity does not function in the world's illusions, just as I do not belong to that realm of separation.
So the two systems are they're fundamentally incompatible.
Completely. The Logos represents creative, spiritual reality, the perfect, organized truth of existence. The world's illusions are the structures of belief, behavior, and societal organization built upon the premise of separation. When the Logos life operates openly, it exposes the instability, the temporality, and the sheer falsehood of the illusion.
It threatens the entire framework of the separated reality.
Which is why the resistance is so absolute.
So the world awareness resists the truth because the truth obliterates the scaffolding of its own perceived reality. This leads directly to the petition in verse 15, which is often misinterpreted as passive withdrawal. I do not speak for their removal from the world.
This is a vital caveat and a major instruction for you, the listener. He is not asking for their physical removal, but for their protection and identity, that they be kept in their true self from the illusions and distortions of the world awareness.
So they have to operate in the world, meaning physically interacting with the separated structures, but remain anchored entirely in their true spiritual identity.
Exactly. It requires a level of internal mastery.
If we use our analogy of the operating system, they have to run the sacred self admin program constantly, even while dealing with the demands of the world awareness environment. They are physically present, but spiritually and cognitively absent from the illusion.
That's a perfect way to describe it. It's an exercise in maintaining cognitive dissonance with the surrounding reality. And verse 16 reiterates that foundation of identity. They are not from the world awareness of separation, just as I am not from it, for their origin is the eternal.
It's repeated for emphasis, a metaphysical passport stamp.
It affirms their non-origination from the separated realm. They are fundamentally eternal beings having a temporary, localized experience.
Right.
Verses 17 through 19 then transition into the process of spiritual preparation and consecration. This isn't a one-time event, it's a systematic alignment. How does this setting apart, this consecration, happen according to the source?
Verse 17. Set their conscious awareness apart into the clarity of truth. For the Logos word is truth, the revelation of their eternal identity. So consecration is defined as clarifying consciousness.
It's a process of purification. Consecration in this translation is the active separation of their conscious awareness from all that is illusory, aligning it exclusively with truth. And the Logos word is the embodiment of that truth.
So consecration is the ongoing process of realizing and inhabiting your inherent truth, defined by the Logos blueprint.
It is the dedication of one's mind to eternal identity.
And this realization has a visible, expressive consequence, detailed in verse 18, a mirroring expression. The consecration isn't meant to be internal only.
No. As I have been revealed into visibility as breath's expression, so I open them into visibility as expressions of the same breath and the same eternal life.
So the revelation of the messenger served as the template.
It did. He opens them into visibility as co-expressions of the fundamental, singular, eternal life. It's a multiplication of the Logos life into multiple sacred selves who are now operating fully in the world, embodying the truth that was previously only visibly expressed through the messenger.
The ultimate aim, then, is shared consecration, covered in verse 19. Jesus wasn't consecrated just for himself or for the sake of setting an abstract ideal.
No, his act of consecration was functional for their awakening. And for their awakening, I was consecrated to the full realization of truth so that they also may awaken into the same consecrated awareness of their eternal oneness. His realization was the required template and demonstration.
Whoa, hang on a second. I need to stop on the specific detail the source explicitly provides here. The expert notes that Jesus functioned in their presence as the plural of Elohim Ruwach Breath, just as they are. That completely overturns the singular prophet archetype we often associate with traditional readings.
It does.
Can you elaborate on the implications of that plurality for the everyday listener? What does that mean?
This is a radical, central metaphysical claim of Richmond's work. When the source states that Jesus functioned as the plural of Elohim Ruwach Breath, it means his manifestation wasn't just a conduit, but the full expression of the collective source potential.
Okay.
If Elohim, the majestic plural, is the starting point, and the sacred self is formed in that image, then the true identity of humanity is inherently pluralistic while being singular in source.
So his visible function was a mirror for their shared collective origin.
Precisely. His singular physical manifestation was demonstrating the collective, unified, plural reality of the Godhead, and that they share in that plurality. It immediately eliminates any hierarchical gap between the consecrated messenger and the awakening recipient.
It establishes them as co-creators.
And co-expressions of the same unified life force. This plurality validates the universal nature of the Logos life and sets the stage for the universal scope of the final verses.
That radical idea of plural expression leads us perfectly into the final section, where the conversation expands dramatically. The scope moves from the disciples present to a universal application. This transition needs to feel momentous, not rushed.
It is the ultimate culmination. The conversation shifts from preservation of the specific group to the propagation of the realization to all of creation.
Verse 20 makes that expansion explicit. The conversation is not limited to those present, but also concerns all whose inner hearing will awaken through the revelation expressed in the disciples.
So the disciples move from being recipients to being carriers of the revelation.
Right. But what's the mechanism of transmission here? It's crucial. Inner hearing.
It's not just a physical broadcast of a message. It's the spiritual readiness required to perceive the truth conveyed through the living example of the disciples. Their existence, functioning as one consciousness in the world of separation, becomes the message itself.
And the ultimate goal is monumental, addressed in verse 21. That all may realize their oneness. The standard for this oneness is absolute union. As you, divine presence, are in me and I am in you, that they also may know themselves in us.
That sets the bar incredibly high.
It seems impossibly high. The union of humanity must mirror the union of source and messenger.
But the bar is only high if you believe separation is the norm. For Richmond, this is simply the statement of the natural state. The goal is not imitation, but realization of a pre-existing fact.
And the practical outcome of this realization is crucial.
It is. It ties directly back to challenging the world awareness, so that the world awareness may perceive that eternal union is the truth of every sacred self.
The disciples' realized union serves as the irrefutable evidence visible to the world awareness, showing them that their foundational belief in separation is an illusion. The truth of every sacred self is eternal union. That's a huge burden of proof placed on the collective awakening.
It is the ultimate proof by demonstration. If the separated world sees beings operating in total unity, radiating the same life force, the illusion of separation begins to dissolve.
Moving to verse 22 and 23, we return to the theme of shared radiance. The gift of the eternal revealed in Jesus is now revealed in them, leading to the same oneness as their natural state. What does this shared radiance enable in terms of consciousness?
The source states this realization awakens them into perfect conscious realization. This is the state where there is no doubt or confusion about identity or origin. The realization is total.
And this allows the world awareness to know, without question, that they arise from the eternal.
It does. But what ties us all together is the connection to love. The ultimate synthesis union, connected to love. The same love with which Jesus experiences loving the source is the love with which divine source loves them. For we are one life. The love is identical because the life is identical. This is the ultimate collapse of hierarchy. The love experienced by the consecrated messenger and the love experienced by the sacred self are identical because they share one life.
So, if the shared love is the proof of unity, we have to unpack what this agape love means in this high-stakes context. Dr. Richmond's explicit use of agape here is not accidental.
Not at all. Agape is used precisely to separate this love from philia, which is brotherly or conditional love, or eros, which is temporal or romantic love.
Right.
Agape is unconditional, non-temporal, and universal. It is the very substance of the source. When Jesus says the source loves them with the same agape that flows between source and him, he is saying they are loved with the foundational energy of reality.
So it reinforces the eternal nature of the breath as pure, constant, non-judgmental love.
It is the essential binding force of the oneness.
Verse 24 then describes Jesus' final desire for those awakening through him. What does he want them to experience now that they understand the blueprint of love and union?
He desires that they be with him in the realization of our eternal union, so they may perceive the radiance that the divine voice of breath revealed in him. For breath embraced me in love before visibility began.
He's pulling them back into the consciousness of pre-existence.
He is. He wants them to fully experience this profound, intimate radiance, not as a historical event, but as a current conscious reality. It demands a radical shift from temporal thinking to eternal perception.
This brings us back to the core conflict with the separated world in verse 25. The knowledge of the breath is the dividing line.
It is. While the world awareness has not known breath, the awakening ones have come to know that I embody the expression. The world awareness operates in ignorance of the source, breath. They live in a system of separation, focused on temporary forms.
But the awakening ones have recognized the truth embodied by the messenger.
The expression, yes. And they have begun to realize that they are part of that same expression. Knowledge of the breath is synonymous with knowledge of oneness.
And the conversation concludes in verse 26, detailing the ongoing process of unveiling. It's not a finished revelation that ends at the arrest. It's an active, continuing process.
The source states he will continue to unveil divine presence as breathed eternal life. This process has a singular, purposeful endpoint, so that the agape love with which I am loved may awaken in them, and breath may be known in them as their true life.
So the goal of all revelation is the awakening of that unconditional agape love.
And this awakening is not just a feeling. It is the fundamental realization that breath, the source of all existence, is literally their true life. Love is not a commandment. It is an ontological fact that, when recognized, defines reality.
So the revelation of identity is the revelation of love, and the realization of love is the realization of their true eternal identity. It is the perfect closed loop of absolute unity delivered right before the final physical separation.
A perfect summary.
Okay, let's bring this back and synthesize these core takeaways for you, our listener. We've spent the last chunk of time mapping out a really profound reinterpretation of John 17, driven by Dr. Richmond's metaphysical framework, which, insists on stripping away all metaphor.
Structurally, this conversation achieves several critical things. First, it redefined life, not as chronological duration, but as intimate union with the source.
Right.
Second, it established the eternal origin of the sacred self, contrasting it sharply with the concept of temporary world awareness, a structure we exist in but are not from.
And the practical mandate for the disciple remains clear. The goal is not removal from the world, but living within it while actively resisting its illusions of separation by maintaining one consciousness. The identity of the consecrated messenger and the awakening disciple is fundamentally the same, defined by the shared radiance and the agape love that flows from Elohim Ruwach Breath to every being.
And I think the enduring value of the RERichmond translation, its ability to force us to confront the metaphysical mechanics behind terms like logos, breath, and eternal oneness. We were forced to think about the conversation as a declaration of process and identity, rather than just a simple narrative prayer.
It turns a historical event into a universal statement about consciousness. It's a profound piece of philosophical clarification. And to close this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to consider, based directly on the material we just analyzed and the stark contrast between the sacred self and the world awareness.
If eternal union is the truth of every sacred self, as the translation explicitly states, and divine source loves you with the same agape love it loves the consecrated messenger, this raises a potent personal question for reflection.
What's the question?
If your true eternal life is this unconditional love and unity, what specific, immediate operational beliefs, what illusions of separation derived from the world awareness are you still holding on to that prevent the joy of your true identity from fully manifesting?
A question worth pondering deeply, especially when navigating the separated world with the mandate of oneness. We appreciate you joining us for this intense look at the language of eternal oneness. Until next time, keep diving deep.